Okay. Sunday, August 17th, 2025. Part 2 video. We're going to discuss the reasons why the population is in decline in Western nations. And this is like answering, there was a comment in one of the videos asking like what we're supposed to do or what Europe should do. But I guess we have to get behind the reasons for, and I also was asking about the reasons. The main reason, I suppose, like in Korea and Japan, where this all started, this whole population crash started there, and now it's hitting Europe. It's in America to some degree, not as bad. America has immigration, but the birth rates in America are generally a little bit higher than they are in Europe and other Western nations. What is causing all this? I guess the main reason is economic, obviously, right? We are in a culture like, instead of staying home with your parents as long as possible, you have to get out of the house when you're 18, you live in a dormitory, you rack up a bunch of student debt. Even in Norway, you rack up debt. The tuition is free in the schools, but you have to still borrow money for your living expenses, and it's quite high. So it's like this in a lot of countries, even in Europe. They say you get free education and stuff, but yeah, the education is free, but the room and board is on another level. So you got all this debt, then you get out, you got to get a job, you work, you want to get your own apartment, and you're already in your 30s, and especially for women, they have like till they're 30, 35, and then a lot of fertility problems kick in. And for guys, the stress can kill the fertility, so people have to take on these high stress jobs. And this is the whole dynamic in Western countries now. We have moved from the countryside to the city. In the last 20 years, I think there are more people living in cities than living in villages now. So it's just, that's the economic side of the argument. But I suppose that could have been overcome. India is a very urban culture and they have a high birth rate. Most people are living in cities and working long hours, studying a lot in school. And, they manage to have families. So there's like, it's got to be something more, right? Because the economic argument's like the easy explanation. That's your trivial solution in mathematics. So there has to be something more to it, right? And my theory on that is the digital consumption. And even in India, you're seeing like among educated groups, the birth rates have dropped off. It's like people are getting on these electronic devices, and it's just numbing their brain, and they're getting information overload, and it's very hard to form relationships nowadays. Everyone is so whacked out on their phones and everything, and just scrolling, and what is it, paradox of choice? I have this friend Aaron, he's an American guy here, and he had that. I didn't hear this thing called paradox of choice till my 50s. I wish I would have learned this concept in my 20s. When you're overwhelmed with choices, you end up doing nothing. When you have too much to choose from, you end up choosing nothing, or the choices slip away from you, or you can't make up your mind. And I think that's what's going on. Like in India, they still have these arranged marriages. They're giving away. It's changing in India pretty fast, but here in these Western societies where you choose people and everything yourself, it's people are got information overload now, and have these crazy expectations because everything is like the view of their life is shaped by Instagram. Just these very carefully prepared posts that just show like 1 second and 24-hour day. So I think that's the real reason. I don't think this economic thing is, that's part of it. That's like the first reason that, it's very hard to afford a good apartment and a good home to start your family. People were starting families like, in New York City and stuff in the Great Depression. They just, reduce their expectations and live below their means, or just set their, they're able to make do with what they had. They didn't need all this like a 6-bedroom McMansion, with a nursery and a playroom, and people want to get all this stuff first. And I guess some people are lucky enough they inherit it or something. So, but yeah, I think it's a digital culture. I think it's just the digital culture in the cities, and priority, right? Having kids. We're seeing in Western countries, people are having dogs. Dogs don't open every drawer in the house and throw everything on the floor, and every second you don't have to watch them that they're going to get their fingers clipped. Now the baby is like 19 months old, and this is like it's hard. Like she's trying to get her fingers and everything, and it just takes one door to smash her fingers, and there'll be an emergency room. And I've had so many saves every day. It's just like being a goalkeeper, or something, just doing goaltending. It's so a lot of people don't want to go through this. It's it's a lot of lack of sleep, and then you have to keep a job, and you have to catch up on the weekends when the kid's asleep. People, like, especially now living this city life, they want to enjoy life, quote unquote, enjoy life, right? They want to do the restaurants, and they want to, go on trips, go on these weekend trips. And let me tell you, traveling with a baby is nothing like what you see on Instagram. It is a negotiation. It's sometimes you have to wait. It's a timing issue. It's let me just make sure the train isn't coming. I heard something, but no, I don't see any. Usually these tracks are quiet on the weekends. So it's like, it's a bit like that. It's what is it? You're not in control. That's it. So people want to be in control of everything these days, and that is something really hard that's a really hard concept that, once you've lived in these tract societies, you go to college, or you do high school, take your test, get into college, you have your job in college, you get through. Everything's very tracked and predictable. If you do A, you'll get B, and then you get out in the real world. Mostly you do A, you'll mostly get B. Maybe there's some politics or whatever, but people have control. And then with kids, there's no control. It's really you just have to experience it. I think you people with kids understand this. And there's always so many things to worry about. There's always when they're in this climbing and exploration phase, and when they're just born in the first year, you're really worried about the SIDS thing, because their body is still developing. They call it the fourth trimester. That all that's going well, and make sure they're sleeping, gaining weight, and then they start moving around, and you still have to worry about those things on top of new things, and it takes up your whole day. And like traveling with a baby, like I say, it's just not like they show in the TV and movies, that they just flopping around like a pet, and just cooperating. They're doing just the opposite, and it's like when we were flying with the baby, back from Brussels to Warsaw, they give you this like lap belt, seat belt that like latches onto your seat belt. She wasn't having it, and the flight attendants, obviously, that's very strict. It's flying, you just got to do it. So you got to fight with the baby, and baby's screaming, and that's a really hard thing to hear. And a lot of people have relatives and have seen, whatever, been uncles or aunts to people, or just have seen their friends with kids, and are like, oh hell no, not for me. So this is what's going on in the Western world, and we're getting birth rate numbers now. You need 2.1 to sustain, and we're getting numbers like 0.9 here in Ukraine, 1.1 in Southern Europe, maybe 1.5 in Finland. I think Finland is the best one. They were up at 2 and they've fallen off, but I think that's because this digital culture has kicked in. People are softer, less resilient, and it's because they didn't grow up on a farm. They didn't, when you grow up on a farm, there's a lot of things out of your control. Weather, animals get diseases, the crops, fail. Just you're dealing with stuff, and circumstances all the time. And then you get into a city life, you live in a little box like we do, and everything kind of runs like a clock, and you don't like your routine getting broken. So I think answers that question. It's a cultural change, and then you have, in Europe, like, okay, these Muslims are living the same way. They live in apartments, and they have TV and they have internet and everything else, but they're reproducing. But that's like a religious thing, and a family and a cultural pressure, and maybe something that they prioritize. They see this as like the life. This is like their main thing, instead of like getting a 6-bedroom house and 2 cars before starting the family. They just start the family and hope that stuff comes along later. And they're willing to live with their parents and grandparents to get some help. And Western people, including myself, don't live with our parents. They just want to live on their own and invite parents over when it's convenient, or they live far away from their parents and relatives. So it's it's cultural. It's this digital thing. Economic is obviously the big one, right? I guess if everybody was a millionaire, or everybody was just given a house, like in Saudi Arabia or in United Arab Emirates, they have the birth rates are pretty high, I suppose. But again, that's more religion. But so it's a tough nut to crack. But like in Korea, right, and in Japan, most people live in the cities, and they got into this entertainment workaholic culture, where they just were burned out at the end of the day, no time for relationships. That's more Korea and Japan. These people are working like 2,500 hours a year. And Americans are right up there. Americans are working like some really crazy hours every year. But in America, there's still this religious culture among the Christians. And, there's a lot of Muslims in America. People don't know this, but there are quite a few. And, so there is still religion in America, like your Mormons and your Amish and your evangelicals and your Catholics. And they're, but it's coming, like you go in New York City and stuff, there's not that many kids. You go in any big city in America, there's not really that many kids. But still, Americans are still spread out in small, medium towns where there is like some housing you can get into, and there is a culture for this. It's like something people want to do, but it's changing. It's America will probably be the last one to have the population collapse out of all the Western countries. But Europe, it's definitely more pronounced. And I think, like I said, in Europe, there's just a lot of things to do. There's restaurants and concerts, and it's just everybody is close together. You're on this infrastructure. You got these metros, and it's just time flies there. Like when I was living in Oslo, time flies. It's just it's an easy life. Once you get your job and you get your apartment, life is easy. You're always meeting new people, and there's always like some festival or concert on the weekends, and the time just flies. And it's so and so I don't know how to fix this. How we fix this. We have to give people incentive to start the family first, then pursue the career. Because we haven't we haven't found a solution to the biology problems. Yes, people are having kids later and stuff, but it's risky. It's still not. It's not what biology wants. Biology wants you having kids like, between 18 and 25, actually. To be honest. And then this Israeli actress Gal Gadot, she had her kids first and then went into the movie business. She was very young, and Kim Kardashian also. So I don't know if the society has to create a structure for that and create a cultural change, because everyone thinks, oh, you're still a kid, at 27, oh, they're just a kid, and all of this, and then it's too late. It's and it also just becomes habitual, just living that way becomes habitual, so yeah, it's a cultural thing. But this is I don't think anyone's going to watch my video and do these policy changes, and I don't think nobody's going to call and ask me what I think. So this is just something we're going to have to accept, that this is the change, that this is a byproduct of Western advanced civilization, is that it wipes itself out in the long run. They're too smart for their own good. Paradox of choice. Too many choices for their own good. And then you get the demographic collapse and all the things that go with that, right? So like in Japan, the real estate markets and a lot of the small towns are giving the houses away, or like in Italy, in a lot of the small towns, they're giving houses for $1. And then there's no skilled people, you know, and so these towns, the economies just collapse, and then everyone just concentrates into the cities, and there's no one to work on the farms. They have to bring in migrants, and you know, the migrants are breeding like rabbits, and then you have this evolutionary change, right? You know, we're just witnessing evolution. There's nothing we can do about it. We have to just learn how to optimize the situation for our own personal needs. You know, joining a white nationalist group ain't going to help anything. I mean, those people don't have any kids. You know, they're all weirdos on the internet, you know, posting memes and stuff, or living in some compound somewhere. You know, I mean, so it's this is just it's just is what's happening, and it's just something we have to deal with. It's like I was saying, Ukraine by year 2100, you know, 75 years from now, you know, it'll be 129. I might be around. It might, like I said, 75, you know, 80 years ago, no one ever thought that the U.S. and Germany would be allies. You know, 80 years from now, Ukraine and Russia might be friends as one of these last bastions of like old European civilization, quote unquote European civilization, as the demographic, you know, that's like almost 4 generations in Europe from now. You know, a generation is 20 years. So 4 generations of people having 4 kids apiece, and then changing, you know, voting in, you know, their government doing what's important to them. And, you know, so, yeah, people got to really look at history and then look forward and see where things are going and do the math. I really encourage people to do the math. But yeah, that's what my thoughts on that. I don't know if that answers your questions or not, but there's nothing we can do about it. You know, if the tech companies are like the cigarette companies, if they want to put these, or the Coca-Cola, if they want to put these unhealthy products out there and it destroys the culture, it takes like a government to act and people to become self-aware. In cigarettes, it took like 100 years before people realized that cigarettes were bad, and it took another 20 years to get them out of the, it's still in the culture in America, but it's mostly been stamped out in like Norway, Sweden, you know. In America, it's like mostly unacceptable to smoke, but it was hard. So it might take like 100 years to get these phones and computer culture that, you know, for recreation. I mean, for work, it's great, but, you know, for like, you know, recreation and stuff, it's another story, you know, and it's going to take 100 years probably before people say, oh, this is bad, and, you know, make laws against it. Who knows? And we're seeing a little bit of this, like awakening that digital devices, like schools, expensive schools are banning the devices. Very, very expensive schools are doing it. But yeah, so I don't know. It's like I said, we just have to read the situation and adjust accordingly, because you can't change it. You know, I know in America anything is possible if you have the will and the dream, but that just ain't true. You know, this is like a tidal glacial force. This is like ocean tides or glaciers moving, or, you know, tectonic plates. You know, this is just one of those things. You know, and it would take like all the billionaires in the world, all the governments in the world to, you know, act at once and in unity to reverse these kind of processes. So, yep. Anyway, that's all I got. See you. Bye.